Hello and welcome to That Shooting Show. My name's Steve Anderson. I am your humble host. Want to thank our partners first. You know them, you love them. Say it with me. Walther Firearms, simply the finest production firearms you can purchase. And they put their money where my mouth is, and you get a 30-day money-back guarantee if you are unsatisfied in any way. Walther's going to take that thing back and give you your money back, no questions asked. There's nobody else in the industry doing this that I'm aware of. That's because these guns are the best you can get in a production type firearm. It's as simple as that. And of course, Targets USA manufactures the finest steel targetry on the planet. CR Speed, as you know, makes the finest gun handling gadgetry you can wrap around your waist or anywhere else. Hunter's HD Gold is the only eyewear that I wear, and you can see that I are wearing it right now like I always do. The AMG-Lab.com Commanderson timer continues to turn heads and blow minds by putting the time into the tablet, capturing every glorious event of your soon-to-be improved hit factor right there in the tablet so you can look at all the data. And, of course, OutdoorDynamics.net remanufactures the finest competition ammunition you can dispense from a Freedom Seed dispenser, and ShootingSportsInnovations.com is a lot to type because there's a lot to see. As always, you can go to AndersonShooting.com and click upcoming classes to see where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing. I'll give you the highlights. April 27 and 28, Golden Valley, Arizona. May 4 and 5, Lodi, Wisconsin. We're going to be in Vermont on May the 11th and 12th. We're going to be in South Africa most of May. So you South Africans, you have got many, many, many great classes coming in South Africa. June, we're going to be at Pennsylvania at the Castlewood Rod and Gun Club, June 22 and 23. Wichita, Kansas, June 29 and 30, or pretty close. I think it's actually Conway Springs, but pretty close to Wichita. And in July, we're going to be in the Cavalier Gun Club with Joey Sauerland, and that's going to be July 6 and 7 at Cavalier. We have a private event for the Central Jersey Rifle and Pistol Club. That's Central Jersey Rifle and Pistol Club members only, July 20 and 21. And we're probably going to be doing something in Texas with Joey on July 27 and 28. That'll probably be Mission 160. So that is just a small sample of where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing. And the most recent, let's take a look here. Online Mental Management, April 10, 11, and 12 at 5 p.m. Eastern. So that's just a small sample. Where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing. And, of course, you can always go to AndersonShooting.com and click upcoming classes for more information there. All right, so let's talk about how to increase hit factor. It is extremely common for people who are relatively new to think that increasing hit factor is running faster and shooting faster. And I have made a list of 12 ways. 12 and a half, 13 ways to increase hit factor. And I listed everything I could think of, and I didn't get to running faster and shooting faster. Running faster and shooting faster works to a point, and then it quits working very dramatically. The other thing about running faster and shooting faster, hang on one second, let me make sure this isn't important. Okay, we'll get right back to that. Hang on. Yes. Okay. When the wife communicates, there's only two kinds of communication: right now and immediately. Those are only two kinds. So running faster and shooting faster is interesting because it can work pretty good locally. If you're running faster and shooting faster locally, and you're significantly quicker than everybody else, that can work pretty good. And this can give you sort of a false sense of, I suppose, complacency, because when you go out of town, it'll quit working. And you won't be able to run fast enough and shoot fast enough to compete with people who are fast as you or potentially faster. So we're going to look at some other ways to increase hit factor that have very little to do with running faster and shooting faster. Okay? So number one, you've got to look at the stage and find ways to reduce the amount of time spent not shooting. It's very simple. Anytime you can combine activities, obviously this is why we do our reloads while moving. If we're moving and we can't be shooting, it's a great time to get a reload done. Very frequently, if we can move on the draw, that's a good thing to do, because we're combining activities. Instead of moving and then drawing, now we're drawing and moving. So we're using that time spent not shooting to accomplish more stuff. So anytime you can combine activities and or reduce the amount of time spent not shooting, that'll be awesome for your hit factor. And reducing the amount of time spent not shooting is probably the only universal stage planning principle that I'm aware of that is 100% true all of the time. If you're considering a stage plan that has long periods of dead time, there might be a better way. Because anytime there's dead time in the stage and you're not shooting, that is 0 points per second. Staying moving is an easy way to increase the number of points that you shoot per second. It's the only reason to shoot on the move. There's no other reason to do it. Well, I can shoot really fast and run really fast. I don't need to shoot while moving. Okay, well, maybe that's true. And I don't know how to answer that question universally. People ask all the time, when should I post up? When should I stay moving? All I know is every single time I've tested it, somebody will say, okay, I'm really good at setups and I'm really fast and I shoot really fast. I want to post up. I'll say, you set up whatever you want and let's test it. And the vast majority, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but the vast majority of the time, if the shooter can make the shots while they're moving, the hit factor winds up being higher when they stay moving versus posting up, if they can make the shots. See, this argument of posting up versus moving, it starts with the assumption that you can't make the shots while you're moving. If you could make the shots while you're moving, you wouldn't be asking the question. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. But you've got to avoid dead time in your plan. If there's long periods of time not shooting in your plan, there might be a better way. Okay. Now, I tried really hard to make today's program mental game free. So this will be like the closest, well, maybe, largely mental game free. Okay. The other thing you've got to understand to increase your hit factor is a subconscious stage plan is always going to be faster than a non-subconscious stage plan. It's very simple. When you know the route, you can focus on driving. And when you know the stage, you can focus on shooting. If you're making decisions while you're shooting the stage, these decisions take time. And they also degrade your accuracy because you're focused on the map and not on the driving. So you need to get at least 20 reps of your stage plan, and the visualized reps are better than the walking reps. So you can walk the stage 20 times, that's helpful, but the mental reps you do, the visual reps, are far better and far more important than the walking reps. So we've got to get at least 20, and you can combine those, walking and visualizing. I'm just telling you, the visualized reps are better, and the round count should be the only audio in your visualization. There should be no technical instruction. Nothing to do with your feet, nothing to do with your grip, no technique in there. The only audio in that movie needs to be the round count. And if there's something you want to be doing, be visualizing what you want to be doing, capture the feeling of what you want to be doing, as opposed to giving yourself technical instructions. Those technical instructions wake up the conscious mind, and they prevent subconscious skill and subconscious stage plan. On a related note, number 3, decide your stage plan early to prevent brain farts. Brain farts are the result of indecision caused by competing stage plans. You've got a fragment of going this way, you got a fragment of going that way. And the brain fart is caused by failing to make that decision. You get to the split, or you get to the place where the indecision occurs, and you freeze for some period of time. Those brain farts will cause reload issues, and they'll cause missed targets, and they will reduce your hit factor. So decide your stage plan early and get a subconscious stage plan. Number 4, learn to call your shots. Shot calling is one of the easiest ways to increase your points per second. That's because looking for hits is very slow. If you're firing shots and you're peeking over the gun to see where those bullets went, you're not scoring points while you're doing that. You're peeking over the gun looking for the hits you already shot. And watching steel fall takes forever. It takes about a full second for a full-size popper to fall down. And it takes probably a third of that time for it to start to fall down. That is wasted time that you can make up by shot calling. Go ahead. Go watch the videos of your favorite top shooters. Watch them shoot steel. If there's 3 steel in the array, they probably shot the third one before the first one hits the ground. And if you don't know how to call your shots and you're not able to do that, and you're stuck watching steel fall down looking for bullet holes, it takes forever. And in makeup shots, it takes even longer. An uncalled makeup is going to be 0.8 of a second or more. A called makeup will be 0.4 of a second or less. Steel, paper, anything you got. Any makeup shot that's required will take roughly half the time based on it being called versus uncalled. And shot calling is seeing the sight lift, not seeing where the sights are when you've pressed the trigger. And there is nothing faster than knowing you've hit the target. Nothing faster. The next thing I need you to do is learn to shoot in and out of positions. And what that means is if there's an array that's got 4 targets in it, you need to be shooting something on the way in, you need to be shooting something on the way out. And you need to be pausing in there instead of prairie dogging, meerkatting, setting up. Whenever you get into that position, whatever height your body is, whatever your feet and legs are doing, just pause there to make the more difficult shots. And then you can resume getting out of there much easier than if you do a full setup. Because if you do a full setup, it's going to take you roughly 0.3 to a half second to stand up. It's going to take you 0.3 to a half second to decompress and get out of there. If you can avoid the setup and simply pause to make the more difficult shot, it'll save a ton of time, resulting in more points per second and a higher hit factor. Number 6, this is somewhat related. Learn to do the creep. The creep is where you've established motion during a stage, you started moving, and there's a more difficult shot that requires a little bit of stability. All you need to do is slow down or gentlify whatever movement you're doing for the slightly more difficult shot. Let's call that pausing instead of stopping. And the easiest way to learn to do this is to put more difficult shots in your shooting while moving drills. So whatever you're doing to shoot while moving, mix it up with a couple of more difficult shots, put some difficult steel in there, put some difficult paper in there, mix it up between standard shooting while moving, close and easy, and slightly more difficult headshots, partials, and steel, and teach yourself to pause for the more difficult shots instead of stopping. Stopping takes forever. Pausing is very quick. Think about a VCR. I used to use this definition all the time, or this analogy all the time. Those of you that are old enough to remember VHS players, video cassettes, young people have to Google that. They were archaic and terrible. But when you hit stop, the whole mechanism had to disengage and go jugga 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 jugga. Took a long time. And then when you hit play, it had to do all that in reverse. Jugga 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 jugga. But if you hit pause instead of stop, it's instantaneous because everything is ready to go. And as soon as you hit play, it resumes forward motion and everything is fine. Okay. Number 7, use the shuffle for short periods of lateral movement. The shuffle is one of the things that I did not know about when I was a grandmaster on the Super Squad. I didn't have any idea how to do the shuffle. So if I had to move 6 feet to the right, I would shoot my shots, admire my work, decompress my body, turn to the right, run as fast as I could, turn my body back around, raise my body up to full height, and then shoot more perfect shots. Wasn't calling my shots, and I didn't know the shuffle. You've got to use the shuffle for short periods of lateral movement. Keeping the hips and shoulders square to the target saves a ton of time. And this move does not require much exertion. When you're learning to do the shuffle, you have a tendency to want to put a bunch of muscle into it. It actually works better if you don't. You're just kind of gliding across. And this is one, actually everything in here, as I look at the outline for this, these are all of the things that we do in the AndersonShooting.com classes. Every single one of them is in here. Shooting in, shooting out, learning the creep, learning the shuffle, learning to call your shots, learning to reduce the time spent not shooting. This is what we show you how to do in class. Number 8, every position has some kind of contribution to leaving. This is related to things we've discussed, but one of the biggest time killers is people are in a position that they think required them to stop. They've stopped. They've got a perfect stance on their last target. They shoot their last 2 shots. They admire their work, and then they think about getting out of there. Every single position that requires a pause has some kind of contribution to leaving. Watch the videos of your favorite shooters. Watch the videos of the top shooters. You will almost always see some kind of contribution to leaving as they're firing the last shot or shots. This one single principle will revolutionize your shooting when you learn to do it. It's usually a lean or a step. You're either leaning away, you're shifting your body weight, you're picking up an outside foot, you're picking up an inside foot. Whether it's inside or outside depends on what direction you're going and where you're going next. Your job is to find that contribution to leaving and have a subconscious skill ready for it. When you're walking stages, many people look at the position they're in and go, okay, what do I got to do here? But they don't think about what's next. When you're in a position that requires a stop or a pause, what is next? What is the next thing you have to do? And how can you contribute to that as you're firing your last shot or shots? This goes back to multitasking. Instead of shooting and then leaving, I'll be shooting while I'm leaving. I'll be leaving while I'm shooting. And we'll come back to this in a minute, but in training, you're going to have to think about your feet a lot. It's very difficult for people that have trained a perfect stance for every shot. Their body literally does not want to do anything while they're shooting. And frequently in class, people literally can't do it. I'll say, hey, can you pick up a foot on that last shot? And they literally can't do it. That's because they've trained all their shooting to have, require, and use a perfect stance. You don't need a perfect stance for the vast majority of shots in the sport. And you don't have time for a setup for the vast majority of the shots in the sport. Okay, so we got to get rid of the formal setup. When you watch the top shooters, you will very rarely see a formal setup in the middle of a field course. You may be focused on other things that they're doing, but that's what I really want you to watch. Watch videos of the top shooters. How often do you see a formal setup in the middle of the field course? Not very often. And when you're practicing this, thinking about your feet is going to produce poor shooting. And that's okay. You're learning to work on your feet. The targets aren't super important while you're learning how to do this. But the other lesson is also very important. If thinking about my feet while I'm training produces poor shooting, what's likely to happen in competition if I think about my feet? If I think about my feet, it's very likely to produce poor shooting. So you've got to make these techniques subconscious so you don't have to think about your feet while you're shooting. Backing out is a tremendous time saver. Anytime you can be backing out of an array while you're finishing up on it, backing out of a corner while you're finishing up on it, it is a huge time saver. Huge. Okay. Number 9, stretch your comfort zone for shooting while moving. Okay. What that means is there are targets that you see that you know immediately that you can shoot. So hang on one second. I gotta do not disturb here. We're getting a bunch of disturbances here, and we don't want that. So, Ark Levy's yelling at his radio right now. You're supposed to do that before you start, Anderson. Yeah, I know. I run a little late today. Struggling to think of a podcast topic. It's going to be fine. Don't worry. So, stretch your shooting while moving comfort zone. Everybody has a size and distance of a target that they know they can shoot while moving. Your job is to stretch that so that you're more comfortable shooting while moving. Open targets, partial targets, steel targets. The number one way, there's 2 things that are really important when learning to shoot while moving. Number 1, you need to avoid pairs and shoot individual shots. Believe me now, believe me later. If you shoot in pairs while you're moving, anything past 5-6 yards, that second shot's going to be wonky. But if you fire individual shots, shooting alphas is easy. I need you to practice shooting while moving until you forget you're moving. Now, hang on a second. What does that mean? That means the movement is now subconscious. And one thing that's very interesting to me is when I first started, so in every class that we do, we spend about 30% of the second day on shooting while moving. And I used to be really insistent on getting people to do things a certain way technically, and then I realized something. When they shoot while moving long enough to forget they're moving, the scores skyrocket. And the technical things that I want them to do are not near as important. Obviously, if there's something serious going on technically, we're going to address it. But what I've learned is that getting people to shoot while moving until they forget they're moving is more powerful than any specific technique. Yes, there are things I want you to do with your feet that are better than others. There are some tricks that will smooth that stuff out. But in general, unless you're doing something really crazy, shooting while moving until you forget you're moving will cause your scores to skyrocket. The mistake most people make is they go out and practice shooting while moving. They're thinking about their feet and they don't shoot very well. And they go, screw it, I can't do it. I'll go back to running fast and shooting fast. But if you'll stay with it long enough to forget you're moving, it gets real easy. Real easy. And of course, you can dry fire while you're moving. That's what I was going to talk about today. And we'll do this another time, but I was going to talk about using refinement and repetition more from a moving standpoint than a standing still standpoint. And we will for sure revisit that because that's really important. But as I was thinking about today's podcast, I was a little bit more excited in talking about this. So that's what I did. Number 10, get obsessed with transitions and training. Transitions is probably, if we were to add everything up, I would guess that the amount of time in between targets, if you add it up, is more than the periods of movement, particularly if the targets are far apart. And people don't talk enough about transitions. Transitions is the only technique aside from shot calling, that when done correctly will increase speed and accuracy at the same time. We can show you a very simple thing to do in transitions that will cut most of your transitions in half. But transitions probably represents the most downtime on any stage. And it's not very exciting to think about. It's not the thing you notice on people's videos. Everybody wants to talk about their splits. I'm interested in their transitions. How long is it taking you in between targets? And one of the things we show people in class is how to cut most of their transitions by 30% or more. Okay? And as I said in the beginning of this program, foot speed and splits are the last two opportunities for most people. If you're focused on foot speed and splits, you're engaged in, well, splits for sure is the highest risk for the least reward when it comes to your hit factor. And most of the movement in the sport, there's not enough distance in the movement for foot speed to be a huge factor. There are exceptions, obviously, but most of your movement is going to be 12 feet or less. And it's very difficult to get to 100% speed and back down in 12 feet. The other thing you've got to remember is it doesn't matter how fast you get there. It matters how fast you get there ready to shoot. And on a related note, it doesn't matter how fast your feet get there. It matters how fast your gun gets there. And that's something else we do in class a bunch. When you get to a new position, that gun needs to be up and ready to shoot. There should have been a whole number on that one. Get the gun to the target. So many people are focused on getting their feet to the new shooting area, but they neglect to get the gun to where it can see the new target. That's one of the things we do a bunch in class. Get the gun to the target. And by the way, another easy way to increase your hit factor, shoot more alphas. I mean, shoot more alphas. Open targets need to be vast majority of alphas, right? If it's an open target, that ought to be 2 alpha. That doesn't mean slow down. That means make shooting alphas a priority. This goes back to splits. If you've got the world's greatest grip and you've been practicing doubles and you're ripping splits and you're getting Alpha Charlie, Alpha Delta, you are not saving enough time in those splits to justify those poor points. You're just not. And I'm just telling you, it's not the place to go looking for it. Foot speed and splits will be the last 2 items for most people. And then I need to remind you that all technical improvements must be subconscious before they will produce good shooting. I cannot stress this enough. If you're learning to do things differently with regard to movement, transitions, things of that nature, while you're thinking about those things, you will get excellent technique because that's what you're thinking about. What you won't get right away is good shooting. And I cannot stress this enough. Any change you're going to make that we've talked about today, shooting on the way in, shooting on the way out, doing the creep, pausing instead of stopping, the contribution to leaving, these things have got to be subconscious before they're going to produce good shooting. Because if you go to a match and you attempt or try to do these things that you've learned just recently, this is one of the reasons why I don't like to do technical classes right before big matches. Because I definitely don't want people thinking about technique while they're shooting an important match. When you're thinking about technique, the overall shooting suffers. But if you find a new way to do something, you've got to rep it until it becomes subconscious, till it becomes normal, till it becomes the only way you can do something. That's when you'll get access to it, and that's when it will produce good shooting. And I just want to remind you that when you're practicing technique, repetition is more important than perfection. That means a high number of acceptable reps is way better than a low number of perfect reps. Oh, you're telling me to go out and practice sloppy shooting. I never said anything about it. I just said you've got to do more reps. So it makes another great case for dry firing at the range. If you're out at the range and you're working on something and it's technical, it's related to foot, feet, body, movement, something like that, there is no need to fire a bullet while you're working on that. And doing it in dry fire can help protect the self-image. Eventually, you're going to have to fire some bullets so that you can feel what it feels like to actually shoot the gun. But while you're working on technique, I'm just telling you, the target's not that important. And if you're evaluating the target while you're trying to learn technique, all you're doing is wasting time and damaging your self-image. It's literally all you're doing. Okay? So, all right, please go to andersonshooting.com, check out upcoming classes to see where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing. We're going to be all over the country this year. We will be adding a couple of classes later this week, probably one in Alabama and probably one at Mission 160 in Texas, so keep an eye out for that. And until we meet again on the range, on the Zoom, on the phone, or anywhere else, be like me, do what I do, say it with me. 1, 2, 3, get to work.